Welcome back. It's panel time, people. Today we've handpicked a group of golf experts and one Heisman Trophy winner to discuss with you the power of what folks across the golf industry are doing to grow the game. On the surface, many of us are aware of the possibilities that await golf when everybody can feel like they have a home in the sport, a stake in it. So let's go further. Let's imagine what the future of golf has in store for all of us if we cultivate it the best way we can. I'm joined today by a wonderful and insightful group. With me, we have top LPGA and Ladies European Tour golfer and Grant Thornton ambassador Mel Reid, Heisman winner, former NFL player, and fanatic weekend golfer, and a very good friend for decades, Desmond Howard, PGA Tour Commissioner Jay Monahan, and Suzy Whaley, Honorary President of the PGA of America. Thank you all for joining us this morning, and to Grant Thornton for making today possible with all of you at home. All right, Desmond, I'm coming to you first. I've been asking you questions for 30 years now. 30 years ago, we were both non-golfers, and
True.
we have become golfers. How did you go from non-golfer to golfer?
Right.
Was it awkward? Did you feel strange? Did you feel like you were a fish out of water?
D, all of the above. I think the thing about golf, Mike, is for guys like us, we find it when it's too late for us to become good at it. Me being a professional athlete, I'm a perfectionist. And then you start to come across other professionals who want to be golfers. And then you really pick up the game and you love it. And you're like, damn, I wish I would have picked this game up younger, earlier in my development.
Do you think it is different now for, we don't have to be a Heisman Trophy winner, but for anyone, person of color, to go to a public golf course, to go to a range and feel less awkward? Do you feel that's more likely now than it was when we started?
So Tiger Woods really changed the game. It's amazing what that one man of color did for that sport. And I'm not a historian, but I would bet that if you spoke to anybody who was a historian of the game, they would say that you couldn't really put a price or you couldn't measure what Tiger Woods did to golf.
But I want to get Mel in here. You have played all over the world. How different does golf look and feel in Europe than the U.S.?
Yeah, I mean, when I moved to America just under 3 years ago, I was shocked by how amazing everyone was over here. I think that in Europe, we still hold on to old traditions. Even the golf club that I grew up at, I wasn't allowed to play on a Saturday because I was a woman. It ended up I couldn't play with my dad on a Saturday and his friends, and it got to a point where we just would be very unpopular with the club because I would just tee up with them because they wanted to play with me. So I think that it's certainly changing, but that's one of the things that I noticed being here was I felt like they were a lot more inclusive here than they are in Europe.
But it's great to hear that you just put a peg in the ground and said, let's go. Suzy, I want to ask you about institutional changes. You have been involved in so many parts of this, and at near the top of the pyramid. What institutional changes would you like to see? I'm sure you are making notes, either mental or literal, as you move around in various capacities. Tell us about some institutional changes you would like to see immediately, if possible.
But we're not even close. We need to do way better. We need to have intentional foundations and steps. We need to offer access. We need to have manufacturers and media companies really talking about the imagery and showcasing it on an equal level. And when you look at the sport in general as a whole, yes, are we doing better? We are. But for young black children to want to participate in this sport, for young girls to want to participate in this sport, they need to see themselves in the sport. And while Tiger absolutely had this incredible impact on the game, you look at the Mariah Stackhouse, who's on the LPGA Tour, where is she and how is she being elevated in this sport amongst everything that we're trying to accomplish? Grant Thornton, thankfully, is doing that. They're picking up LPGA players and they want to talk about them and they want to showcase them. But it's going to take more than just everybody saying this is the right thing to do. It's going to be about financing it, giving access to it, having equipment companies provide the equipment to do it. It's about PGA and LPGA professional coaches being involved in their growth and their development and making sure that they one day can sit in a chair over there and say, you know what, I'm pretty darn good at this and I love it. And whether they choose to be a tour player or a professional football player or whether they choose to be in business, they have the game for a lifetime. And I think that's really what our goal is. It's to look, golf needs to look like the world, and it doesn't. and we need to fix that.
Mel, I was going to ask you, since the commissioner's sitting right here, we're going to put you on the spot a little bit and say if you could be commissioner for a day. That's always fun to play, right? If I could run things for a day, what would I change? What would it look like?
I'd probably call Jay up and ask him how, you know, how meant to do my job. I think it's all about being more inclusive. Obviously, for me, I'm a little bit biased. I would like to promote the LPGA Tour a little bit more. I think we've got an incredible product, and I don't think that we get to showcase as much as we would like on how good and how the strength and depth of players we do have on our tour. So it's certainly moving in the right direction, like we said. I'm always going to fight hard for equality because I'm in it and I see the way that we do get treated sometimes, and it is a little bit unfair.
Tell me about your home course now. What's the policy? Has the policy changed?
My home course in England? Mm-hmm. Yeah, they now allow women on a Saturday, which is really cool. Which should be. It shouldn't even be an equation
Probably doing
anyway.
no part to your success, perhaps?
Maybe. I was very proud they made me an honorary member.
Desmond, are you a recruiter? Do you find yourself saying to people who you think should play but don't?
I do find myself trying to recruit guys because I was recruited. Gus Johnson, who's a great TV personality, Gus actually sent me a pair of his old sticks. So that's like the best recruiting tool ever is to send someone some clubs, And so, it gets no better than that. And so I have to pay it forward, so to speak. One interesting point about learning or having access to it at an early age. So I'm talking to Mel before we get on the air. I'm like, so what age did you start playing golf? She said, well, I was old. I was probably like 11. I was like, what? Wait, what? But that's like
that's the answer, right?
That's the answer. Like she said, she started at 11. She was old. But when my sons were born, that's when I really picked up the game. So I started to, buy those guys clubs too. I have one who's a lefty, so I had to give him some special clubs. But yeah, so you want to pay it forward. You want to tell your other friends, try to get your son or your daughter into golf. It's a wonderful game. Educate them about it and the mental fortitude that it takes to go out there and perform at a high level is ridiculous.
37 when I picked up a club for the first time. And it was pragmatic. The thought was pragmatic. I didn't know I would become obsessive for the ensuing 20 whatever years it's been now, 24 years. We're in such a fascinating place as it regards every industry, being divided, quite frankly, as a nation. And I just wonder, is there pushback?
There is pushback. It's very limited. And I welcome it because that gives me and us the opportunity to explain exactly what we're doing, why we're going to do it, and that person or that group needs to get on board with what we're doing.
I think the pushback is fair. Our organization at the PGA of America, we're, our member association, we're only 4.8% female. And we're 6% from a minority background. So that pushback's fair. I'm like Jay. If we're not talking about it, we can't change it. So we need to be talking about it. And so we're taking intentional steps in workforce diversification, in vendor inclusion, in ensuring that all our vendor opportunities go out to vast groups, women-only owned businesses, LGBTQ businesses. Our Tier 1 and Tier 2 procurement opportunities are involved in that. We want to make sure the game, obviously the consumers, look like more like the world. And as we look to our foundation at the PGA of America, we've made steps to have fellowships for people who've never played the game of golf from a minority background, where we're paying their full year salary to go into the golf community and be a part of that. I think talking about it is the most important thing because education is right at the forefront of our goals and our pillars. And so what we did at the PGA of America, we brought athletes from outside the golf world. We're trying to bring the outside world into the game in a way that's tangible, but also relatable and authentic. They love the game, they want to be a part of the game, they want to talk about the game, so why in the world wouldn't we have them speaking to the youth in the game to tell them golf's cool. Golf is really cool now. And that's the fun. You've got Mel Reid, right? You have interesting people playing in the world of golf. Let's highlight and promote them in a way that makes this game something people are saying, well, I want to do that. I want to be a part. How do I do that? And then we need to have the answer to that.
There's a couple of things opens up a whole door of questions. I want to get back to making it cool in a second. But Desmond, something you said struck me. You in Cleveland, me growing up in Chicago, we played everything.
Absolutely.
Except golf growing up.
Exactly.
And you mentioned Tiger. And I wanted to double back to ask you this. Are you surprised at this point that there's still only like 3 African-American men on tour. Are you surprised that number is still as low as it is?
And I am surprised that there aren't more, I guess, minorities at the top of the game right now. I do think that inclusion is starting to come at a slow pace, but it's still starting to come. You see it with things that like Top Golf, and so people are picking up the game. They find it fun now. Before there was a stigma attached to it where it was like a country club type of sport that was only in the suburbs. It was never for kids in the city or different areas. So now when you see a Top Golf, that's when not only the participation starts to pick up, but the whole stigma that it's not cool. Like you said, it's cool to play golf. And one thing that was mentioned was how you have these professional athletes. We have such a tremendous amount of respect for each other. Basketball players, football players, golfers, we all have and so we love doing it together. That needs to be promoted more.
Yeah.
To me, there's a natural synergy there that we need to take advantage of, and we need to put on camera. We need to put like tournaments on TV that involves the extreme diversity of different backgrounds from different sports. It could be NHL players, NBA players, NFL players, and golfers, all out there having fun doing the sport that we love, which is golf. Yeah.
As I'm coming in from the airport last night, I'm like, what? Is that Top Golf?
Yeah.
And living as part of my life in Scottsdale, there's at least, I don't know, it seems like there's a Top Golf every stop along the 101. By the way, my son is a lefty.
It
is hard still. He's a 13-year-old lefty, and it seems like he's growing 3 inches every couple of months. I'm constantly calling U.S. kids to beg, where can I find more, equipment to buy? Where can I find this driver at this length? It's amazing.
Yep.
Mel, I'm glad your home course has said enough, and women can play on Saturday or whenever. Is this something as you travel around that you still find? This is insane to me. You got used to it, or what do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you ever get used to it. I mean, I would love golf to be more accessible for everybody. I do think it's the greatest game you can play. Like you said, you can take it up at 2 years old or 37 years old, and you can be competitive. You can be competitive against me and so forth. And so, for me, I actually find it intimidating going to new golf courses. As a professional golfer,
Why?
I still get intimidated because there are so many clubs still country clubs. And for me, even for me, it's intimidating. So imagine for somebody of color or a woman taking up the game, going into these golf clubs, it is an intimidating position for them. And so for me, I would love to see golf clubs take a little bit more responsibility in that and, maybe modernizing it a little bit and just making it everybody's welcome. I think that it's, like I said, such a fantastic game for anybody to take up, and would just love more people to be comfortable to go to golf clubs and pick up the game of golf, which is why I think things like Top Golf and Drive Shack is such a nice little, kind of gateway into the game, because there's no pressure. Everybody's basically a beginner. There's, nobody's staring at you, and you don't feel out of place. You just feel comfortable there, and I think that that's really been great for the game of golf and for people to participate or start participating in the game.
When you first heard the notion of Top Golf, did you wince? Did you smile? What was the reaction? Because I know my reactions were all over the place. What did you feel when you first heard of what this thing was going to be out there that now has drawn so many people in?
I need to go. Seriously.
Have you been now?
Oh, I've been in many markets, and we have made it a point to get to know the great people at Top Golf, and we collaborate a lot with them. And I think it's the kind of innovation that any industry needs, but it was the perfect innovation at the right time for our industry. And it started in the UK, and came to the US, and thankfully, a group of investors got behind the concept and built it out, and I think it's you can't say it any better than Mel just said it. For people that haven't played the game, it's as comfortable an introduction as you could possibly have. It's entertaining, it's fun, it's the kind of experience you want to go back to, and so I think that, coupled with programs that are really getting to young people, convey and teach the values of the sport at a young age.
when you went to Topgolf the first time, the first thing you thought was what, Suzy?
I called my husband and said we need to own one.
Better answer.
And sadly, we did not. Huge mistake. That is a true story. That night I called him. You know, what's really fascinating about we have 21 million people playing off-course golf right now, right? Which Topgolf obviously is a huge contingent in that number. But what's really fascinating about Topgolf is 43% of the people that participate there are women. Right? Wow. Only 25% of the women participate in the game on course.
Does this
right?
speak to what Mel was saying?
It is exactly what Mel's saying, right? And it's less intimidating. I went to a Topgolf competitor the other night, and because it's the only thing we have where I live, and I was the one that was intimidated and felt uncomfortable because I came from work in my golf attire. Right, so I looked like the biggest nerd there. Everybody else was in cool clothes. I've got like my, cap on and my golf clothes on. I'm like, oh my gosh, right? And my husband had brought my clubs up. I'm like, seriously?
Everybody was scared of you. They were all scared to be on
So it was like the vice
game.
versa experience. And
lasering the pins.
I just, I just think, that's golf to me. Now, like if you want to play golf on the golf course, great. We want to transition those people who are playing at Topgolf or any off-course
opportunity. Is there any evidence of that
opportunity.
happening, or is it too early?
Oh no, there is evidence. In fact, we have, as Jay mentioned, we have a partnership with Topgolf. We have PGA and LPGA professionals coaching at Topgolf. We have PGA Junior League working out of Topgolf. So, it's an amazing opportunity for the golf world to embrace and welcome. I mean, imagine if we could get those 21 million people, right, to a golf course. And introduce them in a way that they didn't feel intimidated. I mean, imagine a day where a Mel Reid doesn't feel intimidated walking to a golf property. That has to happen before 2030. And, we are committed to that.
Because even if you get them, you won't retain them if there is some discomfort with the process. I mean, that should be, I'm thinking those are the happiest hours of my week. They say something about my life. Those are the happiest hours. But if you're not comfortable, if you don't feel welcome, then what happens? Do you retain? I was stunned to hear the number today. Somebody told me that while 5 million new golfers have come aboard during the pandemic, the sport lost like 4 million. And if that's true, that it's still, while that's a plus, the numbers are clearly, you'd rather have plus 1 million than not. It still speaks to retention, does it not, Commissioner?
More people are now engaging in the game than have in a long, long time. And the question becomes, what are we doing right now to make certain that 5-10 years down the road, we're taking the steps to make sure that those people that have come in are going to want to stay in and engage even more at a time where, fortunately, all the activities that have been taken away from us are now going to come back online. So it's a very competitive, the sport needs to compete, and where it needs to compete and where it needs to demonstrate that progress is in the area of that welcoming, inclusive environment in every single way that you engage with the game. Like that's how we keep people involved, that's how we grow the game.
Let's use 10 years as an example of where this could be, where you'd like to see it, and how it gets there.
Well, the beauty about this conversation that we're having, it seems as though it's trending in the right direction. That's what it seems like is happening right now. I believe that 10 years from now, we will have more diversity. I think the game is starting to become more and more popular. People are starting to pick it up. And we touched on a word to me that's very important. It's being intimidated and not being judged. And I think that's what other outlets allow us to do when we're beginners and we don't know what we're doing. Because you feel intimidated and you feel judged. And that's what like going to Topgolf can do for you, because you're not being judged. You're not, that whole intimidation factor. You can go to a golf course and just because of like the rules and regulations and things that you're not accustomed to, right out the gate, you feel slightly intimidated. And then when you're on the club, if you're not on the course, you're not doing things exactly the way it's supposed to be done, then you can feel like you're being judged. And that will stop you from returning. You don't have that when you go to a place like a Topgolf. So I do think that we're starting to trend in the right direction. And I believe that 10 years from now, we will see more diversity.
I still can't get over you being intimidated.
I am, yeah.
I'd be intimidated if I saw you stepping on
Yeah.
the first tee at my club.
Yeah, I get that.
Mel's here. I feel sore now. I'm gonna go back in the clubhouse.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I want to hear some of your thoughts too on.
Yeah, I mean, I think Suzy made a great point earlier. I think the demographic of golf has to be the demographic of the world, right? The way that the world is changing, and you know, people are now challenging their beliefs and sticking up for themselves. And I think if one thing came out of the pandemic is that all these organizations, the PGA Tour, LPGA, PGA of America, had to come together and say, look, we need to make a change here. And so, yeah, I would just love people not to be intimidated playing golf. I mean, if more people were more inclusive and more welcoming for people to take up the game, surely that helps everybody. So that's what I really do believe we are moving in the right direction. We're moving way quicker now than we ever have before, you know, from a diversity point of view. And so I do believe that in 10 years' time, it is going to look very, very different. And hopefully, and well, not even hopefully, I know so for the better.
We'll let the commissioner go last on this one. Suzy,
Yeah.
you've mentioned several fascinating things, including institutionally, you know, what has to happen here. But any other observations and passions or annoyances you may have in regard to this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really hard to be it if you can't see it, right? And so yes, many people have broken out and been a part of something that they were first or nobody had seen them, but a lot of people want to see it to be a part of it. And we need to do better. Corporate marketing dollars are 1% to women's sports, right? 1% of corporate marketing dollars. Like, how are we supposed to get young girls to want to aspire to be Mel Reid if they can't see her, if they don't know where she is and they don't know what they're doing? And when you have companies like this who are actually supporting that, to bring other companies alongside of that, when you have the commissioner sitting here saying he's in support of that, right? When you have athletes saying, look at this. This is something that's incredible for your health, for your wellness, for your longevity, and for your life. Then we have a real chance of changing the face of the game, whether it be amongst women, whether it be amongst people of color, whatever it might be. But we have to be able to see it, to live it, believe it, and think it's authentic. And we have to do that amongst professionals in the industry. We have to do that amongst facilities in the industry. We have to do that amongst leadership in the industry. We have to have teams that look like the world as well, or it's just not authentic, and it's not gonna, people aren't gonna buy in. They're gonna go do something else. And we don't want them to go do something else. We want them to come and play golf, and we want them to be a part of it. So I think it's a huge pillar with the 6 components that we've hit on today. And as we build those in hopes by 2030, and as we really develop that opportunity in every single area, then we're gonna make a difference, and we're gonna see a difference.
Commissioner?
I would just say that when exclusionary practices are part of the past of your industry and of your sport, it's incumbent on you by 2030, whatever time frame you select, once we get there, to have done a better job than everybody else, because we're playing catch up. I mean, that's a part of our past, and that's part of how our sport is perceived. And so for every single social identity, we need to be in a much better place in 2030. And honestly, the way I see it, to Suzy's point, is we need to lead. We need to do such a good job that people are saying, wow, I can't believe that that's where the game of golf has gotten to. As much as I thought they were going to make progress, I didn't think they could get there.
Clearly, this is a huge part of your agenda. How reasonable is it to be able to?
It's entirely reasonable. That's where we're going to be as a society, and that's where we're going to be as a sport. And I think that it's, you know, everybody needs to fully understand where they are. Everybody really needs to have hard conversations, and understand where they're not. You know, Desmond just raised a point to me that literally sent chills down my spine. You know, what is intimidating? Like, have we really identified how to overcome intimidation? Have we really identified, you know, how to overcome being judgmental? Have we like really understanding these issues and getting to a place where there's a path forward and we're talking about them and we're more comfortable talking about them? Ultimately, the inertia of that will push everybody, I think, to the right place.
This is fascinating for anybody who plays golf, who loves it. I think it's doubly fascinating for those of us who have felt that intimidation or awkwardness or am I welcome? And so to have these I don't know that these conversations were even had 25 years ago. I mean, I think it's fascinating to have one now, at which at the top levels of the sport, they're found important. And I agree with you. I agree with you wholeheartedly about trending. If anybody has anything they want to add as a PS, we can do it quickly before. We don't have a bell. There's not going to be a buzzer to stop me. So somebody, we should let you have the last word on this. We should, yeah. I just wonder, any last thoughts that either or both of you have?
Let's make a deal. 1 year from today, let's get back. Maybe we won't be able to do it here in person. Maybe we will. Maybe we do it on a Zoom's call. But let's get back and talk about where we are. And let's have an open discussion about what progress we have made and what progress we haven't made. Because I think everybody here would agree that we're committed to that. And I think it would be good to have that honest conversation.
That sounds good. Sounds like a good reason to be back here if possible as well.
You're all welcome.
I think Grant Thornton should bring us back.
Are all
Count
good.
me in.
I'll be crazy.
Thanks to each of you for giving us your thoughts today and for being part of the solution when it comes to changing the face of golf. Mel, Suzy, Jay, and Desmond, enjoy the week and enjoy the players. Now let's take a look at one final story from the course as we're introduced to a golfer who uses his imagination uniquely to play the game in a way that might surprise all of you and challenge you to think about experiencing it from a totally different perspective.